Thank you, Ryan. And thank you all for joining me today to hear our culture journey. It's been quite interesting hearing the speakers and the fireside chats this morning, as there's been so many of those experiences shared today that resonate with our journey, such as the importance of speak up, psychological safety, elevating voices, leaders walking their talk and being vulnerable, and measuring progress against metrics. But I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the beautiful land we're joining on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. The vision of the Fred Hollows Foundation is a world in which no person is needlessly blind or vision impaired. How lucky am I to be working for an organisation with such an incredible purpose, with work that tangibly improves the lives of the people as well as their families that we work with. But unfortunately, this alone does not create a great organisational culture. In our experience, we've needed to be really intentional in articulating the culture we needed to achieve our strategic aspirations. Now, a bit of context. Most of our 450-person workforce is remote and spread across 21 countries. In Australia, we're located across 5 states and utilise a hybrid approach to working, where we work from home and we come into the office to collaborate in a shared working space. When I talk about culture today, I'm referring to our organisational culture and not the multiple local cultures that make up our rich workforce. Specifically, I'm referring to the patterns of behaviour within our organisation that are encouraged, discouraged and tolerated by people and systems over time. In 2019, when we launched our current strategy, we had a unique opportunity to specifically articulate what culture we needed to achieve the strategy. So we partnered with an organisation called Walking the Talk to help us articulate the culture we needed, specifically the behaviours and micro-behaviours that would drive the achievement of our strategy. And we refer to this as our target culture. Walking the Talk then helped us measure our progress towards it. I'm conscious today that whilst culture is unique to an organisation, I'm conscious today that I'll be talking to you about our cultural journey, and what works for us may not necessarily work for you. But whilst culture is unique to an organisation, I am hoping that I'll give you some food for thought and examples of things that you can take back to your organisations to evolve your own cultures. Each year, we survey our people using the Walking the Talk survey methodology to understand how closely our people's experience aligns with the target culture we desire. Our first survey told us that we weren't where we wanted to be, so we took a structured and intentional approach. Our executives first review the results and make behavioural commitments. In our first year, we created an executive team charter, and in the following years, we reviewed and edited the charter to ensure that it was focusing our behaviours in the right areas. We identified culture champions. In the first year, we invited 10 culture champions to form a culture working group. Now, these people were good cultural role models and influencers amongst their peers. They weren't all senior leaders, and we had a real mix across geographies as well as leadership bands. In future years, to get further momentum and groundswell for change, we opened this up for people to nominate themselves, and we didn't restrict this number, so we then created a Culture Champions Network. Our CEO always shares the results. It was critically important for our culture transformation to be a strategic driver led by our CEO, so messaging always starts with him and then is cascaded by our executives and senior leaders. We're also really transparent. So Ian, our CEO, not only shares the detailed results of the survey, but he also shares our executive commitments. Each year, we identified 3 focus areas because it's important to do a few things right and amplify the messaging. In our first year, our culture working group identified the top 3 areas to focus on and made specific recommendations for change, which our executives responded to. In later years, our survey clearly identified the areas we needed to focus on, so the role of the culture champions evolved to one of experimenting with change at a local level and then sharing those learnings through the Culture Champions Network. Once we received the recommendations from the Culture Working Group and later the themes that came out of the survey, executives committed to specific actions and we had an executive sponsor for each action. We then amplified the messages by regularly discussing the focus areas in CEO updates, executive coffee chats, and divisional updates, just to name a few of the channels. Importantly, we also tracked the progress of each action and created a culture action tracker that communicated the progress not only with all staff, but also with our board. And finally, we conduct a satisfaction pulse survey with 10 questions aligned with our focus areas to see if our interventions are having the right impact on our people's satisfaction. So, the actions we took. In order to get lasting change, our actions in our first 2 years focused heavily on executive-led behaviours because culture needs to be led from the top. Our people told us that we needed to build trust, cross-team collaboration, and better empower our people. To build trust, our executives participated in a culture development program to deeply understand our leadership shadow. And this is the impact that our behaviour has, not only on our teams, but on all the people that we interact with. We reinforce this with culture KPIs and 360 cultural insight surveys that outline the extent to which we all demonstrated our desired behaviours in our day-to-day work. As I previously mentioned, we created an executive team charter, and whilst we've evolved it over the years, still to this day, the first 30 minutes of every monthly executive team meeting, we discuss our culture, we shout out where we've lived our culture, but we also call out the missed opportunities where we could have demonstrated our charter behaviours more. Each week, a member of the executive team had a virtual coffee chat where all staff could attend and ask questions, and nothing was, everything was on the table. We talked about the areas the executive team were focusing on, our current priorities within our areas, our own personal development following our 360 results, and what we were personally doing to drive our culture forward. We also amplified the importance of Speak Up through regular CEO and executive communications. Speak Up is encouraging our people to let us know how they're going, but importantly, to let us know when things aren't going the way they should be. We also had anonymous channels available and encouraged our people to share their observation with a culture champion. Now, year one also coincided with COVID in 2020, so we regularly communicated the additional leave support we offered our people, and like many organisations, we also increased our mental health and wellbeing offerings and made our Global Mental Health Day an annual event. And this is a day where nobody works and we all take the day to focus on our own health and wellbeing. And these initiatives were all really well received by our people. With regard to cross-team collaboration, we have quarterly cross-divisional team meetings, virtual team timeouts, and these are 30-minute socials run by cross-divisional teams and are always a lot of fun. We broadened access to attend team meetings outside divisions where it impacted our work so that people could keep across information much more easily than previously. We also empowered our people. My role as Director of People and the program's Implementation Director based out of Kenya were made permanent members of the executive team, so the voice of our people and our country programs were better heard. The symbol of this change was not lost on our people, and there was a lot of positive feedback provided following this change. We also started reporting our gender representation at each of our leadership bands, not only to our people but also to our board, and increased transparency of decision making by regularly talking about our financial position, and this also built trust. Finally, we amended our delegation of authority to increase the scope of decision making to senior leaders to enable more locally led decisions to be made. In Year 2, whilst we continued with a number of our previous actions, we added a few more. Executives agreed to listen more and react less to enhance psychological safety. Now, importantly, there wasn't an expectation that executives would agree with all the different opinions, but by allowing people to feel heard and explaining the rationale for decisions, we built psychological safety and allowed more divergent views to be shared and explored. Executives agreed to demonstrate vulnerability and empathy more. So, for example, if a situation arose where an executive made a mistake, we talked about it with our team so the team could learn from it. This increased trust and also encouraged a learning environment. The executive team also gave each other permission to call out unhelpful behaviours. This was actually quite challenging, but it's now become one of our habits. And we really support each other to foster psychological safety, both within our executive team, but also the teams that we work. We also needed to reduce our people's workload. We started with executives reviewing work plans with their senior leaders and deprioritising activities. Reporting was also an incredible burden, so we streamlined it and removed redundant requirements that didn't add value. Senior leaders regularly reviewed work plans and had authority to stop doing things on an ongoing basis, which really helped. We also further enhanced our communication. We introduced culture panel discussions with executives, senior leaders and culture champions to amplify the actions we were taking, as well as the progress we were making to enhance our culture. We extended our coffee chats to senior leaders so they could share their work and their priorities with all staff. And we introduced Women at Hollows discussion circles that included topics such as communicating with pride, confidence and impact, and taming your inner critic. And we had discussion circles for men that included combating gender bias and tangible actions men could make to better support women. In Year 3, our people told us we needed to simplify our work, and so that was the primary focus of our executive team. And we also empowered our senior leaders to take a more active role in culture change, and we shifted our focus to senior leader behaviour. We developed and rolled out a targeted culture program for our senior leaders so they could better understand their leadership shadows. And they undertook the same 360 as the executive team to ascertain the extent to which they demonstrated the desired cultural behaviours in their day-to-day work. We held senior leader culture panel discussions where they shared with all staff the actions they were personally taking at a local level to drive our culture forward. In relation to simplification, we sought feedback to identify the pain points, both within divisions and cross-divisionally, and each executive led a simplification project. We also communicated the benefits of each project once they were realised. For example, the process of financial forecasting was simplified and moved from a monthly process to a quarterly process, So people greatly appreciated both the simplified process as well as the time saved. And we further enabled psychological safety by providing our senior leaders with a psychological safety guidance note that they could refer to so that they could action good practices to enhance psychological safety within their individual teams. And finally, we celebrated the moments that mattered, such as birthdays, births and marriages, NAIDOC Week, and any other days of cultural significance for our people. And when we had opportunities to come together as a team, especially when our overseas colleagues joined us, we had greater emphasis and time spent on connection rather than work output. Now, here's a photo of our executive team and people senior leadership team celebrating at the HR Awards last year. One of our strategic goals was to be recognised externally as an employer of choice. So here's a picture of Ian, our CEO, and I when we won the Employer of Choice Award for the public sector and NFP last year. Now, this was recognition not only for the executive team and people team, but the whole organisation. So we celebrated this organisational achievement in our all hands meeting, our CEO update, our people and culture update, and senior leaders celebrated the award locally with their teams. So, what impact did all these interventions have on our results? Looking at our organisational culture, we measured our cultural health using the Walking the Talk methodology, which incorporates the lens of 6 cultural archetypes that are present in all organisations, and we were really pleased that improved by 6% over the 3 years. With relation to our leaders being seen as open improved 7%, this being open to learning, listening and being humble. Leaders being seen as principled improved 7%, this being acting with integrity and doing what they say they'll do. And leaders being seen as responsible improved 5%, this being following through on the decisions they make, taking personal responsibility when things go wrong, and being comfortable raising the difficult issues. What was particularly encouraging was seeing the 21% improvement in the response to the question, our organisation makes a clear effort to improve employee wellbeing and safety. And I attribute this to our focus on enhancing psychological safety, as well as the COVID interventions and support that we provided. Now, looking at our engagement score improved 13%. We had a 14% improvement in the I'm satisfied with the foundation as a great place to work, 21% improvement in I would recommend the foundation as a great place to work, 23% improvement in there's open and honest two-way communication, 22% improvement in my ideas and suggestions count, and a 10% improvement in I feel psychologically safe working at the foundation. And looking at our organisational performance. This year, in 2023, we're now budgeted to have our biggest programming year off the back of having our highest fundraising amounts last year. We've attributed this organisational success in no small part to our culture work and our people working more collectively and collaboratively. It also coincided with our 30th anniversary, which was another moment that mattered, that we celebrated across our entire organisation. And here's a photo of Ian, our CEO, at our Town Hall anniversary event last year. So what did we learn? Leaders need to walk their talk, and it's especially true for our CEO and executive. As the old adage goes, actions do speak louder than words. We need to amplify messages for our people to actually recognise the change. In line with the rule of 7, people need to hear a message at least 7 times before they really hear it. But it's more than just saying something 7 times. People learn differently, so utilise as many communication mediums that are available to you. In a world of remote working, we can't rely on what we see in the workplace. So creating a psychologically safe work environment is critical, because if people aren't comfortable to speak up when things aren't going well, we just won't know. Equally true is that inclusion can't really happen without psychological safety, as people won't share their thoughts and opinions, and this is critical for employee wellbeing. Without the opportunity to bump into people by the water cooler, we need to intentionally create connections, be they virtual team timeouts, social events, regular one-on-ones and skip-level meetings. And people will lose interest in a drive for cultural change if they don't feel heard. So whilst it's important to listen, it's equally important to respond to the feedback that we receive. And finally, culture is everyone's business. Whilst leaders must lead from the front, real cultural change won't happen if there isn't momentum across the entire organisation. So thank you all for listening. I hope I've given you some food for thought to take back to your organisations. Enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you.